Welcome, everybody, to the subcommittee meeting for the Quality and Standards Subcommittee. Today is Tuesday, August 18th. We are opening the meeting at 6:19, and we'll be discussing COVID-related policies. This subcommittee is being broadcast live and via Zoom platform by PATV, and we will not be having public participation at this subcommittee meeting, only at the subcommittee meeting, and that is because of our limited time and the limited topic for tonight. Sometimes we do allow public participation at subcommittee meetings, but we can't do it this evening. So, without further ado, I'm going to bring up the first policy for us to discuss, and it is concerning face coverings. And this policy was sent out to us by MASC. Okay. And it's very, very direct. It seems to be all-inclusive. I only had one thing to bring up on this, and that was staff members are responsible for providing their own face coverings. It's the second line from the bottom, and my understanding is that the districts will be providing face coverings for the staff if they so request. So I just want to check with Dr. Vidala. Do I have that correct?
Yes, we will provide them. Faculty can wear their own masks if they choose to, if they have certain ones that they want to wear, but we will be providing masks.
Okay, all right. So if we could change that sentence to read, staff members may provide their own face coverings, or if they choose to, the district will provide coverings. Okay.
Now,
Mr. Olympio.
yep, through the chair. How about face shields? Is that considered a face covering? Is that an option for staff or even students?
Yeah, it is, and I think that's why they call this face coverings.
Okay.
So that it encompasses everything.
Okay.
Because some people feel more comfortable
Right.
with those, what is it, balaclava?
Gators.
Yeah.
Okay.
There is an issue, I think, with the gaiters, though.
There is.
I prefer them myself, but I stopped wearing them because I guess it's the elasticy material. In some cases, I guess it's actually like worse than not wearing a mask.
Oh.
Because you can have airflow much more freer through it because it stretches. You know, obviously this is a cloth mask. You're not going to get much through it. Apparently with the gaiters, because they're, stretchy and everything, that can happen. The cloth gaiters, which I know some people have, which are basically bandanas, those seem to be sufficient. But the elasticy material, I guess, has been an issue.
That's interesting. I'd heard that there was something about them, but didn't know that that was what it was.
I prefer them personally, but I switched back to a mask after reading that.
And a lot of people wear just the neckerchiefs tied in the back and pulled up.
Yeah.
So I think right now they're all allowed, and until
Right.
In an hour, that could change, and we'll get a new directive.
Yeah.
And my understanding is that a mask must be worn under the face shield because the face shield is not sufficient.
Okay.
And so as far as providing face shields, we have specific staff members, depending on their jobs,
Sure.
that can have those, but we wouldn't be providing a face shield for every teacher that asks for one. It's only for specifically the roles. And so it's the custodians, nurses, there's some special education folks that, depending on the students they work with. We also have goggles. I have a slide tonight that shows all the different protective equipment that we have access to. So,
Oh, good, okay.
So I'll share that during the meeting.
Good.
Perfect, because I do know that just even certain occupations right now have to wear, different face coverings. So this is a coverall, but I'm glad the specific ones that are required. So
That's good to know.
that's good. Okay. Did anyone else see anything in the policy at all that you wanted to review or that might raise any questions for you?
I was relatively comfortable when
Yeah.
this was done.
Mhm.
Yep.
Okay. And I do think people need to understand, and the question had come up, will all the students and staff be required to wear face coverings? And the answer is yes. And if they refuse, then they will be taken, sent off the property. And that's pretty simple. It's the only way that we can actually operate, other than those very, very specific reasons. If someone has specific medical requirements, and those have to be documented by a
Okay.
doctor, and,
Okay,
yeah. And people should also know that if somebody forgets their mask, we're gonna give them a mask.
right.
If someone forgets a mask every day,
Yeah.
then there's gonna be, some discussion about that, but
Sure.
we all know kids,
Yep.
even adults forget the masks,
yeah.
and so that's good. It's a very reasonable
Yep.
policy.
I
Yeah.
was comfortable with it. Yeah.
Okay, so you think we can bring that forward tonight?
Yes.
Okay, the way I prepared it too, in our packet, is it will be able to be read tonight for first reading.
Okay.
And our policy is that we always have a second reading for policy to be implemented. And if we're still on schedule for next week
Yep.
for a meeting, we can have our second reading and we'll be fine with that. If on some of these others, we need additional time,
Right.
we may have to look into, when the next meeting is, but I think we'll be okay with the second reading as well. Okay, so can I have a motion and a vote to bring this forward to the school committee?
I'll make the motion to bring the policy forward tonight to the full committee.
Okay,
And I'll
all
second.
right, thank you. All right. Now, the second piece of this, it's rather lengthy. Actually, it is about creating, an entire COVID-related policy packet that only applies during this emergency situation. Everything is grouped together in our packet. And it's allowing, like the first one, student assignment to schools. This would amend our policy that requires that the superintendent assign students to specific schools. During the pandemic, if something arose where he had to assign people to other schools and needs to be able to move quickly, this would allow us to give the superintendent that power to do that under the emergency declaration. And these policies are only in force while the emergency is continuing.
Right.
So that one,
Yep.
that one seemed pretty straightforward.
It did.
So would we want to bring that one? Actually, we can go through each of them and then make one vote at the very
Yeah.
end.
Yeah, why don't we do
Okay,
that?
all right, so we're okay with that. And Dr. Vidala, that would work for you too if,
Yes, that makes sense.
yeah, for whatever reason you had to assign students. Same thing with the school calendar. Now, this puts in provisions of collective bargaining agreements,
Right.
and that the superintendent can suspend or revise the school calendar with the approval of the school committee.
Yeah.
I'll be honest, that one just seems like what we do anyway, but, I mean, as we know, it can change in an hour, so
Exactly.
this one makes sense.
Yep,
Yeah.
that, I don't have a problem with that.
Yeah. The class sizes. And this one,
Sure.
really, this one is self-explanatory. And we've always had this in our collective bargaining agreement. Other school districts don't. So, and I know policy comes out from MASC, in general. But this looked fine.
Yep.
I didn't see any problem
No,
with
I
that at
didn't
all.
either.
No. The attendance, this one, we actually do need to have some clarification on our attendance policies.
Yeah.
And I was wondering if everybody would want to hold off on this one. It's just general. But I think we need a discussion about the attendance policy overall. And I know, Dr. Vidal, you and your staff are going to come to us with something, especially with the older grades. So on this one,
Let's hold off.
yeah, if we can hold off on this one, and then this one would basically just codify what you're gonna come to us with. So that one will hold, okay. Time on learning. Got a long history with that in Peabody.
Yeah.
So, the way that this is written, I think you would have to be doing that anyway, according to what comes to you from DESE.
Yes, DESE modified the high school from 990 to 935,
Uh-huh.
and the elementary schools from 900 hours to 850. And so basically, it's 5 hours of time on learning per school day for elementary students for 170 days, and 5.5 hours for high school students, and secondary students.
Right, and they always set.
They
the-
set that.
They set the requirement anyway.
Right.
You could never go below their requirement.
Correct.
Okay, so, on that one,
That's fine.
that one's fine?
Mhm.
Yeah,
I think they probably have that in there in case you had the numbers, 990 and 900 as a requirement for your district, then since DESE modified it, if you have to change the language, now you have the opportunity to do so.
okay. Actually, I don't think we have the numbers in our policy, but I do think it's in the handbooks.
Correct.
And I know a lot of these policies go
Hand in hand.
hand in
yeah.
hand. So I know the handbooks will need to be adjusted
Yes.
anyway, and those are all online,
Yes.
so we can work on those. Okay. This one, the grading and retention, I thought that one was fine as well, because we know that that may be a necessity.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Mhm. All right. And even this with local graduation requirements, I think this policy, it's a good one. And actually, Dr. Vidala, you were working for us, but you weren't getting paid. You were involved, and we had to do something for the students because we have a requirement on community service.
Yes.
And we were allowed to waive that. It took a
Right.
school committee vote, but we were allowed to waive that. So we've been down this path already. And if we have to again, this policy just allows that. It was I think it was a memorandum from the commissioner that allowed it, because it was a true emergency, and a lot of school districts had that problem. But I think this is probably written in response to that specific incident. It could
I think
be,
it gives you more flexibility to
Yeah.
not have to wait for a decree from the commissioner every single time, that now
Yeah.
you have the authority during this time to make those decisions as a body.
that's true, because there were a lot of frantic calls coming from MASC to the commissioner because of school committee members writing in and calling in saying, we need help on this.
Right.
So I think you're right. And this is the same with the special education.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah. And I think what people need to understand, this isn't going to water down any requirements, but
No.
it gives some flexibility under some really tough conditions where sometimes something just cannot be physically accomplished right now.
This whole
Right.
situation is flexible, I think.
What's that?
I said the whole situation we're in is flexible right now.
Yeah, you're
Exactly.
true,
Right,
true.
I don't think, we'll be digging our heels into anything.
And this one, discipline and suspension and expulsion. This policy actually gives the superintendent the ability to write a plan for protocols regarding the students who are disciplined or suspended during the
Right.
emergency. And there can be instances of that. So
Yeah.
that's going to give you that power to come to us with a plan.
Yep, that would,
Yeah,
fine with me.
yeah. And we know that's not going to be done immediately, but
Yep.
we know, it has to be put in place.
Okay, this is exemptions.
And this one is the exemptions. This is
Sure. Yeah.
just common sense.
Mhm.
Yeah. And just like in the mask or the face covering policy, that there are specific groups of students that need the chance to have some different protocols, and we appreciate that. Okay, this one on job descriptions. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and that one, we,
Oh, yeah. This,
yeah, we
this
can
looks
allow,
fine to me. This makes sense.
right. And then it comes back to the school committee anyway.
Yep.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mhm. This one, the students at risk. I just had a question, I don't know if any of you did. It was, during the COVID pandemic, the superintendent or principal of school may revise or suspend provisions of policy to facilitate the education of students at risk or with special physical needs or their family caregivers. The only consideration that I wanted to put in there was that the principal needed to clear it through the superintendent.
Oh, I see what you're saying, because it says superintendent or principal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Because it says or principal, if we could put or principal with the prior approval of the.
Sometimes they use the language superintendent or designee,
Mhm.
and that sort of, it insinuates that the superintendent gave permission to the designee. I don't know
Uh-huh.
if that's easier language for you, rather than saying superintendent or principal with permission of superintendent.
I'd like to spell it out.
You just say superintendent or designee.
Mhm.
A lot of the regulations say that, if that helps.
Is that helpful to you, or would it be better for them to get your permission before they do something like that? I'm just thinking of someone who might do something and not realize the impact, where you look at the broad picture and they're looking at one building. Could we put in there, or principal with superintendent's approval?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that works.
Okay,
That
just to make sure that
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
confer with you.
Yeah, I'd like that.
Yeah,
Yeah, I agree with that.
okay. Okay, and then the privacy.
Yeah.
This one, this is good. But we also had one where people were not allowed to tape the teacher. And there's nothing in here about that, but I know we have that in our policy, and I'd like to know if we might want to look into this one a little bit more, because
It could be a tough subject to navigate depending on what we do tonight.
Yeah.
If we were to do any type of
You wanna
virtual
hold-
learning where it's video-based.
Right.
How that would.
You want to hold off on this one?
I think we might
Run it by
need to.
council?
Yeah,
have to,
because,
right?
I think so.
yeah, and we even have, you might have a beautiful class, beautiful lesson that would be great to tape that. We've always made sure if we did anything, we always got permission. I know now, with Zoom and everything, you can record. I don't know how Google Classroom, if it's the same, it's got that same thing. And only the host can record. I know there's a whole bunch of different parameters on it, but I do think we need to look at that one just in light of our own current policy to make sure that it goes both ways, and that it still gives the ability that if there was a great presentation and maybe we would be allowed to re-show a class where just the teacher is on camera doing the class. There's a lot of different instances where it could be helpful to be able to record a class.
Yeah, I think the consent piece is a big piece of it, so we should probably look into it a little bit deeper.
Okay, yeah, and
Yeah.
especially where we've got something in our policy that's definitely different than what MASC has
Right.
in general, yeah. Okay. And then the pivoting back to remote learning or back to school instruction. That is so specific, we don't even have a citation to put it into our policy manual. But we'll find, Marge will help us find the right numbers for that one. But it's almost like that, I don't know if that really even needs to be a policy or just, I think Dr. Vidal and the staff would do that automatically anyway. How would you gentlemen like to handle that one?
Now, I mean, I would, through the chair.
Sure.
Wouldn't we want to add some kind of language? I would say that this isn't necessarily district-wide. I mean, I could see a scenario where a particular school has an outbreak. And does that necessarily mean that the whole district is going to go remote? If, let's say, the Burke School has an outbreak.
True. Yeah.
And I would think that I would say maybe in some cases you would say, okay, Burke School goes remote for 14 days and we go through all the safety protocols, but I wouldn't think necessarily the rest of the schools would shut down.
That's a good example, yeah.
Because that wouldn't surprise me as a scenario in the winter or something.
Yeah.
And we had discussed sort of a process for making that determination with Sharon Cameron from the Department of Public Health around, you know, based on that risk map, which, you know, is one of the things I'll present today that was put into the reopening plan, is if we are yellow, we would go hybrid. If we were red, then we would switch to remote, and we would have some sort of protocol. We would meet with Department of Public Health and take their guidance, and then we would put it forth so that people knew how we were going to go. If we were red, we were going remote. We would need to stay yellow for 2 weeks 2 consecutive weeks in order to be able to consider coming back, and then we would move forward. So at least having a thoughtful plan about how to do so before, you know, so it's not just when it happens, you're rushing to make a plan, but having something ahead of time that people could expect and know, okay, this is what we're doing as a district if the community data looks this way, you know? So we had talked about considering something like that as a plan on a larger scale, but I think what Mr. Olympia was talking about is if you had a specific school that happened to have a number of cases, you know, you'd want some flexibility to address it locally.
Yeah, because let's just say I could see, you know, a particular scenario where we're in the yellow or we're doing, overall our numbers are great as a district, but I would think we'd want the flexibility that if there was a decent outbreak in a particular school, we would want to say, okay, you know, we'll go remote for this particular school and go on. So I would think we would want that flexibility. Because it could go the other way. Our numbers overall as a city could be great, going on the right track, but who's to say a particular school doesn't have a huge spike that causes concern?
Right.
I wouldn't necessarily want to be tied to, well, we're white or we're yellow, so let's stick with what we got. I mean, a little common sense.
Yeah. Just because the virus itself is such an unknown. No one knows what's going to happen. So we really do have to have that kind of flexibility to be able to continue to educate as many people as possible, as well as possible.
Because I could only imagine, especially it seems like, you know, we're getting a lot of feedback about high school. Let's say we are in some type of hybrid plan where the high school is back and our numbers are great, but then again there's a spike in another school. You know, so I just think we need that flexibility.
That makes sense.
Yeah, and I think everybody will need to see what those protocols are. So that everybody can understand it, you know, going forward, that like what happens in a classroom, what happens in a grade, what happens in a school, you know, family members at different levels, how that all gets dealt with.
They could sign the copies.
Yeah.
We've done that before.
I do.
We're live.
The original ones,
We're live.
Okay.
We're live.
Yeah.
No, no,
The same ones that are in the package.
we're on television right now.
Okay.
Just my only concern with
It's a
that
subcommittee meeting. It's live.
might be
Oh, no.
basically an equity issue. If you had a spike that may prolong in one school, I
Yeah.
wouldn't want a whole school to fall behind.
Right.
Stay in the back
Type of
of the
thing.
room.
I do think we have to make sure we have some consistency across the city.
Right. And actually, that's one of the policies that gives Dr. Vidala that capability of deciding if he has to reassign people or move people to,
Right.
various
Well,
locations.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Right,
So it kind of does go hand in
Yeah,
hand.
that makes sense.
right,
Yeah.
absolutely. There's a great example of that. If we do have a continuing problem with a particular school, let's
Mhm.
just say if it affected one of my children's schools,
Right.
and just the numbers weren't great, and now, but my son is okay, yeah, I would start to think as a parent, well, is there space somewhere else where we can, so, yeah, I agree. I mean, we have to, wouldn't want particular students to fall behind, and,
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. So I think on that one, we can hold on this because it's part of a
Yeah,
bigger
I agree.
conversation and a bigger policy statement.
Yeah, I agree,
Okay. All right.
I agree.
And then the homeschooling file, temporary homebound instruction and remote instruction plans for students in quarantine. The back-to-school plan shall provide for students who are temporarily homebound due to illness, quarantine, or disability. That one, too.
So we're required to provide an education. And so under the previous rules, if somebody was home or hospital bound, we provide tutoring.
Right.
This allows us a little bit more flexibility to provide a remote education,
Mhm.
but they're anticipating that's going to be more widespread. And so before we'd send tutors to the house or meet at the public library or have something like that, this would allow us to immediately, it's our obligation to immediately continue their education, and we would do so in a remote manner.
Okay, yeah, because if someone's homesick, they're not gonna be able to keep up with the class
Right.
in many cases. Okay, so that one, we will bring that one forward? Okay. And then the next one, public safety officers.
I think that's more related if we were to make any changes with the police in the building, which
Oh, I'm sorry, Andrew, I couldn't hear you.
I'm sorry. Said I think that might be related to if we were to make any changes with police in the building, if there was a policy about visitors. So personally, I don't think we'll be making any changes regarding police anytime soon,
No.
Yeah.
so.
I just
Or
assume.
our school resource officers, I should say.
Right, but no, I see what you mean, and I think that that's something that the superintendent and the chief of police would work out anyway, as far as any changes with our school resource officer responsibilities. You know, are they gonna have to remove a person who refuses to wear a mask or becomes
Right.
belligerent? Well, if they're belligerent, they'd be removed anyway, but on the grounds of refusing to wear a
Right.
mask.
I just take that last sentence in there in the parentheses, if the district eliminates visitors from school. I bet there's probably some districts out there that are saying, well, we don't need SROs. We're
Right.
not having visitors. I don't think that's here by any means, so.
Right.
You know,
I think you're right, I think that's in there like as an example,
Yeah.
and we don't need that, because that could be limiting.
yeah.
Right.
Okay, so we'll take that line out,
Yeah, let's do
but leave the policy in?
that. Yep.
Okay. Okay, this one, the eligibility for participation in extra-school activities. That's gonna be a big one, because MIAA is involved, but it also goes above and beyond sports. It's for everything, Dr.
Yep.
Vidala. So, if, I would say that we need to have a plan, and this would be a good policy to put in place. Yeah,
So we'll hold off, right?
right. Now, this one, attendance versus participation in events.
We're gonna
King
need-
Solomon is on duty for this one.
Yeah.
We'll need to look at the guidance put out by the
Yeah.
department. So,
Yeah,
We'll
you
hold
know,
off.
the prior policy was that you need to be in school
Mm-hmm.
in order to participate. Now, if remote if it's a remote day or
Right.
if we're going remote,
Mhm.
it's still attendance, it still counts as a school day.
Exactly.
So the department is saying, and they're going to get more specific with this, you know, as it comes forward, but, you know, if you go remote, that doesn't preclude you from playing sports.
Right.
You know, because it's a school day and you're still learning and there's still an
Mhm.
education going on. So this gives us a little flexibility of if you're not in the building, can you still play?
Mhm.
And, you know, we'll follow those guidelines.
Right.
yeah,
You know, knock on wood, you know, if we're in a situation in the spring where we're relatively in a normal state, people will have to look at the record of what we did in the fall, and, you know, it'll probably be related to events that we might have at the end of the normal school year, so. You know,
Right.
I think that's a good policy to take on.
yeah. I think we definitely need one, so we can clarify to people that you still have a
Attendance counts.
responsibility.
Yeah.
You have a
Yeah.
responsibility to attend the classes, whether it's in a building or on the computer. You have, if you want to participate, there's requirements.
Yeah.
Okay, so we'll bring that one forward.
Yep.
Any changes?
No.
Okay. Visitors in school buildings, that one, I think is
Sure, that's
Yeah.
self-explanatory.
straightforward.
Yep, can move that.
Yeah. Illness and contact tracing.
Are there state requirements with that right now, with contract tracing, if you were to open a school in some capacity? I mean, I know there's restaurants and things where
Right.
some are doing it. I don't know if
Yeah.
you'd Be required to or not.
So there's guidelines around if you test positive,
Mhm.
that they start with that. And then for us, there's protocols around if someone tests positive, so for example, if a student tests positive, any student that was within a 6-foot radius for more than 10 to 15 minutes would need to be quarantined. And so then that's where the tracing comes in. But when they get tested, they need to provide certain information to the Department of Public Health.
Yep.
Email address, things like that, so then they can start the contact tracing through the Department of Public Health. The
Gotcha.
school, I don't know how much involvement we would have with that, or unless we would just be partners with them.
Okay.
You know, so
Mhm.
I think that's something that we can, you know, look into, and I mean, whatever the guidance is that comes out, we'll follow it, but we'll work closely with the Department of Public Health, because they'll be
Yeah.
coordinating that piece of it.
Okay, good, because I wondered about that as well, whether
Yeah.
staff were required to do that contact tracing in amongst all the other things they're doing, or if that's something that public health would be
Yeah,
taking.
I know our
care of.
nursing staff did it during the
Right.
closure, and so Department of Public Health would oversee much of that work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. All right, so do we want any changes to that, or just bring
Fine.
it, the way it's written
Yep,
is
fine.
fine? Yep, okay. And then transportation and busing?
I see no issue with that one either.
I'm sorry, Dick.
I'm sorry. I said I see no issue with that one either.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I know it. I mean, we have to change the busing regulations as it is.
Yes.
So, better you than us. Okay. Operation and plant management, plant maintenance, I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think that that's very straightforward. The collective bargaining agreements all need to be dealt with, and
Yep.
I think so.
Yep.
Okay. And that's it.
All right.
Those are all of
Easy.
them. Okay, so we're going to bring forward most of them. Some we're going to hold,
Yeah.
and then, all right, now I need a motion.
Okay. Let's see.
How about, it's easier to make a motion about the ones we're gonna hold on,
Okay.
and then to just list the ones that we're going to bring forward tonight. So from my notes, we're going to hold on the
Attendance,
attendance
yeah.
policy. We're going to hold on
Privacy.
the privacy. And that whole thing, they've got the pivoting under privacy, so we're gonna hold on that whole privacy.
Yep. We'll hold on privacy and hold off on extracurricular activities.
Yes, and then bring forward everything else.
All right.
Okay, so,
I'll make a motion that we hold off on the policy of privacy of students, eligibility for participation in extracurricular activities, and I think, and hold off on attendance.
okay,
Second, I'm sorry.
all right, very good. And I vote with the both of you. And then, okay, so we're holding on 3? 1, 2, 3.
Yep.
Yep. And then we had one change. It was under students at risk, it's on that second or third page. Students at risk, JIE, JL, JLC, and JLCC, that we're going to add the language, the superintendent or principal with the approval of the superintendent of a school.
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Second.
Okay. So Andrew first on that one. Second by John.
And actually, we're going to strike language, I think, under the public safety officer on the second.
Oh, that's right.
That parentheses section.
Yeah, the parentheses section. Yeah.
All right, and I vote with you on that. Okay. All right,
We have 5 minutes to spare.
5 minutes to spare.
There we go.
Nicely done, gentlemen. Thank you.
All right.
All right, so we'll bring these forward, and we can adjourn this subcommittee meeting, and then we will come back for the regular full meeting.
Great.
All right,
Thank you. Very good.